Hi there, welcome to the beer room. Tonight we're going to be discussing how to do a proper beer tasting. Now you might be wondering what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about actually lining up the beers like I would do for a beer tasting. I'm talking about how to actually taste a beer and get the most out of it, to really be able to describe that beer. Tonight's beer that we're going to be tasting here is TraquairHouseAle. This is a wonderful bottle, especially with the coming colder months. TraquairHouseAle is a Scottish ale. It's also a Scotch ale. Now, I get a lot of people that come into my store and ask me what's the difference between a Scottish ale and a Scotch ale. Basically, I tell them this: one is stronger than the other. That's really the only thing that differentiates one from the other. All Scottish ales are Scotch ale, all Scotch ales are Scottish ales, but not all Scottish ales are Scotch ales. For example, a Scottish ale is defined in different terms, what we call shillings. 60 and 70 and 80 shillings are considered to be Scottish ales. When it hits 90 shillings, you've got yourself a Scotch ale. And it goes from 90 to 120. We believe that this is an old, dates back to the tax on beer at the time in some bygone era, probably when Scotland was being run by the British. Well, that's no longer the case, but the names or the thought process still sticks around. This right here is considered to be a Scotch ale, not just a Scottish ale. Roughly, this one would be right around 90 to probably 100 in that vein. These beers are very malt-centric. They focus highly on malts. I understand that in America nowadays that hops are all the rage. We've got all these IPAs and these wonderful hoppy beers, and that is wonderful. However, the Scotch ales feature malts. Reason being is, if you've ever been to Scotland, it's cold and it's very rocky. There's not much terrain there that's good for growing hops. In fact, the best places for growing hops are typically the same places that you'd want to grow grapes. There's not many grapes growing in Scotland. So, this is very malt-centric. In fact, to get flavor, the malts are often smoked somehow, typically with some sort of peat or peat wood, or peated wood, as you would call it. What that does, that imparts a very Scotch-like flavor. If you've ever had good Scotch, you recognize that peat flavor when you get it. This one has definitely been smoked, and it's also been barrel-aged, and that's another thing we can get into at another time. Now that you've got a little bit of history on the style of beer, let's give you a little history on this particular beer. TraquairHouseAle is an ale that has been around for a very long time. I believe it was first brewed in the 60s. The Traquair House has been around even longer. It's actually considered to be the Scotland's oldest continually inhabited home. Now, this building used to be the summer home for Scottish royalty and dignitaries. During the 1700s, it was even a place of refuge for Catholics escaping from the Jacobite massacres. The Stuarts of Scotland would allow refuge in their house. This house is huge. It's absolutely gorgeous. The grounds are big. There's hedge mazes everywhere. To give you an example of what it's like, imagine Biltmore House, but with a Scotland setting and the Scotland climate. And it has one thing that I think it has over the Biltmore House. It doesn't have a winery, but it does have a brewery. All right, first step, opening the beer. It shouldn't be hard for most people. This also leads to our first part of the tasting, how a beer looks. Also, notice the way I'm pouring. All beer, we want to follow that 45-degree rule and pour at a 45-degree. Oh, wow. Look at that. Some beers you want to pour with vigor to get a nice head. Some will build up head on their own. Now, the first step in a proper tasting is the color. Take a good look at this. What do you notice? It's kind of a dark amber, almost brown color. It actually is see-through, even though it's rather dark. If you held it up right up to a light, you'd definitely be able to see through it. Very minimal head on that. That means it's very low in carbonation. There's not a whole heck of a lot of yeast adding to this beer. If it was, it'd be more of a Belgian style. The next thing we want to look at is its aroma. Now, there are 3 techniques that people use. 2 of them, we want to keep our hands here on the stem of the tulip. We don't want any smells that might be on our hands to interfere with the smell of beer. So, first one is called the bloodhound technique, and you'll notice why. What you do is you want to get that right up in there and there, kind of give it a little smell and then do a quick smell. Kind of like a bloodhound. Now, I definitely got a little bit of peat. There's a toastiness there. I got a little bit of almond and something that almost kind of akin to barley. That's another one. That's another good flavor that you want in beer. The next technique is the long draw. That's when you just get in there and I think I got a little more peat that time. The third technique is a variation of the long draw, but you don't necessarily have to hold it at the stem. In fact, you kind of want to cup it and really get your face down in there. Still, got about the same that I got off of the long draw. And that's how you smell a beer. Next, we want to focus on its taste and its mouthfeel at the same time. Now, if you're wondering what mouthfeel is, we look at it this way. Think about milk. You have a 2% milk or something that's very light in flavor. It almost has a consistency of water. Now, you get a whole milk, heck, even something that hasn't even been thoroughly pasteurized, it's very thick and you get that rich, creamy feeling. You drink cream, it's very creamy, fills up the mouth fully. That's also what we're looking at here on mouthfeel. Is it thin? Is it watery? Is it inviting? Do you have lots of bubbles to play with? Or do you have that full, rich mouthfeel? All right, now my favorite part, the actual tasting. Man, that is good. If you notice some of the things that I did just now, first, you don't want to swallow immediately. What you want to do is you want to kind of slosh it around a little bit, you know, really open it up, make some bubbles of it. And then I do what I call the bird whistle technique, is when you kind of hold it in your mouth and suck in a little air like a reverse whistle. If you were to do that with water, it would make some weird bird sound. That's why I call it the bird whistle technique. But it really brings in a lot of flavors and really fills your mouth up with flavors so you can get a better idea of what you're looking for. With this, very similar to what I got on the smells. A lot of toffee, a little bit of chocolatey notes, probably from the toasted malt. The peat was stronger in the nose than it was in the mouth and the taste. And the mouthfeel, I would say it was just a little bit north of medium. Not quite a full mouthfeel, but then again, I'm not expecting that because I know the style. But still, very good for this style. Now, you've just been taught how to do a proper beer tasting. So, now that this project is over, I'm going to enjoy this beer. Cheers.